The Economist. Hello and welcome to The Intelligence from The Economist. I'm Jason Palmer.
And I'm Rosie Blore. Every weekday we provide a fresh perspective on the events shaping your world.
Something funny is going on with gym memberships and barbells. Well, actually, something called the barbell effect. The gyms that are doing well are the cheap ones and the really, really expensive ones.
And for many of us, the term grandmaster evokes the image of a middle-aged man stooped over a chessboard. Well, we got the chessboard bit right, but more and more people are reaching the pinnacle of the game while they're still children. But first...
I'm here in the southern suburbs of Beirut, the Dahiyeh, which has been the centre of Israel's airstrikes on Beirut in the last few weeks. It's been almost emptied of residents. Access here is very difficult, very dangerous. We're here with a very, very big group of journalists. We're having a look in this neighbourhood, which has become the centre of Israel's air campaign in Lebanon.
Gareth Brown writes about Lebanon from Beirut.
We've had weeks of heavy airstrikes on the south of Lebanon and on the capital. Israel launched a small invasion of ground troops over the border earlier this week. This ground operation, it's already been quite costly for Israel. On the first day, the IDF confirmed it had lost 8 soldiers. Another soldier was confirmed dead the next day. So we're now up to at least 9 members of the Israeli army killed in action. The number of dead in Lebanon is almost at 2,000. So this is a dramatically intensified conflict. And just last night, there was a huge airstrike in Beirut, which is believed to have taken out Hashem Safiuddin. Now, he's a senior Hezbollah official and was the rumoured favourite to take over from Nasrallah, so that Israeli offensive from the air continues and from the ground continues.
And what have you seen on the ground, Gareth?
We're seeing and hearing the war from all sorts of directions. On the street outside my house, there are many, many displaced people. People are sleeping on cardboard boxes. They're sleeping on mattresses. The sounds of airstrikes echoing in the distance. And these airstrikes, which until a few weeks ago had been quite tightly focused on certain geographical areas, certain targets, we can feel that expanding. Just the other day, there was an airstrike on a medical clinic 500 meters away from the Prime Minister's office. These sounds, this feeling of the aerial assault has become so quotidian. And if I walk out my house now and just go to the shop, I can hear the sound of an Israeli drone buzzing ahead a few hundred meters in the sky. There's a feeling that you're always being watched, always being tracked. And with that, there also is a feeling of tension.
Gareth, you've been to Beirut's southern suburbs. Tell me how you managed that and what you saw.
Well, access into the Dahiyeh is very difficult and dangerous at the minute. It's dangerous because it's being hit with airstrikes every single day. It's sort of widely regarded as a Hezbollah stronghold, and it's under the Dahiyeh where Nasrallah was killed in that airstrike a week ago. But it's also difficult to access because Hezbollah controls the area, and you have to get permission from them to go in and report. And to go in without permission is very, very risky indeed. So a few days ago, Hezbollah organised a media tour of the area, and it was an opportunity for us to go in and see the aftermath of some airstrikes, but also to just get a sense of the atmosphere. Now, it was a bit of a circus. There was probably 300 or 400 journalists sort of packed into cars, driving through this, what is essentially a huge abandoned part of the city. I mean, some of the figures say 700,000 people have fled the Dahiyeh in the last 2 weeks. And now it's a ghost town. So we were taken to 3 sites.
This is the southern suburbs of Beirut. Israel has been pounding this part of Beirut with airstrikes. Behind me used to be the office of Sirat, which is a religious affairs TV network, and it was attacked just 2 days ago. There's a lot of press here.
It was interesting because some Hezbollah officials made some rare public appearances. For obvious reasons, they're not going out in public at the minute. We were able to talk to them, talk to some residents, and really get a feel for that part of town, which is very, very different to downtown Beirut or West Beirut, where I am.
Different in what way?
I think the way the Dahiyeh is so different is here, where I am, in West Beirut, there's a relative normality to life. But as soon as you go into the Dahiyeh, it's very tense. You feel like you're in the heart of a war zone. And with that comes frustration, anger, despair, despondence, not just from Hezbollah, but from the ordinary civilians, the citizens living there. They're very angry, and they wanted to tell us about that anger. One man we came across on the tour likened Israel to a cancer. Some of these airstrike craters are 20 meters deep. The third one we saw was still smouldering from the night before. There's destroyed cars, there's mopeds which have been flung onto the first floor, mounds of rubble, and then the rubble has sort of been decorated with banners of Hezbollah, portraits of Hassan Nasrallah, and the few people there were sort of chanting defiantly. And they're chanting in support of Hezbollah, Nasrallah, and the resistance. This was a tour organised by Hezbollah. It was a propaganda tour, essentially. But we saw with our own eyes the destruction and the damage. We saw the craters. We saw the levelled buildings.
Gareth, what do we know about how strong Hezbollah is more generally? Obviously, it's just over 2 weeks since the pager attacks. Nasrallah was killed a week ago. Now the ground incursion. How much are Hezbollah weakened?
The short answer is that nobody knows for sure. But Hezbollah always prided itself on its secrecy and discipline. That was a strength of its organisation. Undeniably, they have taken a hit regarding their military leadership, their command and control, the chain of command, the political leadership has been hit hard. And it seems that they've also taken a hit in terms of their ability to fire long-range or more advanced missiles at Israel. But I think the war is now changing. Since the ground invasion, this is a new war, essentially. And I spoke to one very senior Lebanese political official who said, look, Israel is now going into Hezbollah's playground. The south is where Hezbollah have spent 20 years preparing for war. This is not going to be easy for the IDF, and we only have to look at history, how previous ground invasions into South Lebanon have gone.
Gareth, as you say, Israel has decided to go into Hezbollah's playground and that's incredibly dangerous for them. Are you suggesting that this war might not go as Israel hopes it will, that it won't be able to neutralise Hezbollah?
Well, as one person put it to me, I think Israel risks snatching defeat from the jaws of victory here. Many people here are very sceptical of the notion of a limited incursion or invasion because there's always another hilltop for someone to shoot at you from. The ground war is a very different war to the aerial war, which the Israelis have undoubtedly dominated. And I spoke to one man in the Dahiyeh who Hezbollah had allowed onto the scene, and though he was a civilian, he spoke as though he were an unofficial spokesperson for the movement.
If there was a new occupation, if Israel was to come and try to occupy parts of Lebanon like it did in the 1980s, how would the Lebanese people react? What would be the response from Lebanon?
First of all, they are dreaming. They will not occupy Lebanon. They will not occupy Lebanon. Even though if they occupy Lebanon, we will resist and resist. We'll make the resistance. We'll go on the resistance until we will do for them what will happen from 1982 till 2000. We defeat them in 2000 and we will defeat them again.
Over the years, Hassan Nasrallah was famous for making these very kind of grand speeches, but we only have to listen to the last speech he made before he was killed. And he knew his group's strength lay in luring Israel into a ground invasion. And in effect, in his last speech, his last words were, bring it on.
نحن نعتبره فرصة بل نعتبره فرصة تاريخية بل نتمناها.
Perhaps he was just speaking from the experience of 2006, the last time Israel sent ground troops into Lebanon. But it seems at the moment that Israel is doing exactly what he might have wanted them to do. this ground invasion could be something of a lifeline for Hezbollah. This has been an incredibly dramatic and deadly few weeks for Lebanon. Over 1 million people have been displaced from their homes. Almost 2,000 Lebanese have been killed. But now the war is entering a new phase, a new chapter. This ground war is going to be very, very different. And it could determine the future not just for Hezbollah and Lebanon, but for the whole of the Middle East.
Sobering words, Gareth. Thank you for talking to us.
Thanks for having me on.
On Monday, it will be 1 year since Hamas attacked Israel on October the 7th. We'll be dedicating the whole show to the Middle East, looking at how the region has been changed and what may lie ahead. And there'll also be a chance to listen again to our recent episode of The Weekend Intelligence, in which our editor-in-chief, Zanny Minton-Beddoes, went to Gaza to ask, what happens when the conflict's over? You'll find the show in our feed.
So I went to a gym called Third Space in Islington, which is in North London.
Avantika Chilcote is The Economist's global business correspondent.
And it was like no gym I'd ever seen before. So when I turned up, what I would call a reception, they actually called a concierge. Then went downstairs and there was a really nice smoothie bar. There was a gym floor, which looked like what you'd expect a gym to look like, lots of weights and machines. But the really busy part was some sort of relaxation zone. There were these big vibrating wheels that people were leaning against to apparently loosen up your muscles. There were these guns that also vibrate that people were sort of shoving into their legs and their arms. Also apparently good for your muscles. There was a huge pool. There was a cold plunge pool. And I'm told that these gyms across London have red light therapy. They have cryo chambers. They have lots of stuff that comes under this term wellness. So to get a club membership, you're looking at spending about £250 a month. The catch is that this Islington club is so busy that if you sign up today, you can't actually start going until February. And this is a British example, but there's premium gyms like this around the world. Equinox, which is New York-based, is probably the best known. And Equinox actually launched a new membership this year that costs $40,000, which is more than the average British person makes.
And so there are plenty of people who want to shell out this kind of money.
Exactly. So the global market for physical activity is worth $1 billion, according to the Global Wellness Institute. And whilst sectors like retail, restaurants are growing pretty slowly right now, the physical activity market, so that's gyms and sport and things, that's expected to grow at an average annual rate of just over 6% between 2023 and 2027.
I mean, all of that sounds counter to the narrative we remember from the post-pandemic era when gyms were really in dire straits.
Yeah, so it was interesting. During lockdowns, sort of 2020 onwards, people were saying that the gym was dead. We'd all got used to working out at home, just a yoga mat, maybe some wine bottles or tin cans as weights. And why would anyone go back to the gym? People bought Pelotons, those sort of stationary bikes that are connected to the internet, and we thought people would just be using them at home. But the truth is, almost as soon as lockdowns were lifted, people rushed back to the gym. I've got some data from a company called Pacer AI. It's an analytics firm that tracks people's location, and you can just see that aside for one 12-month period, you've had a very steady increase in footfall into gyms in America in particular. And so what happened was lockdowns were lifted and people really were craving physical interaction. They wanted to meet other people, and the gym is a great place to do that. Probably the most obvious way to prove that this happened is to look at Peloton. You know, during COVID, this was the poster child for at-home fitness. The stock was going up and up and up. There was a waiting list to get a Peloton bike. And to give you a sense, the market capitalization of Peloton was $50 billion in December 2020. It has since plummeted. It's less than $1.7 billion. This year, the chief executive had to step down. 15% of the workforce was cut, and they've been borrowing more and more. It just goes to show that this at-home fitness trend didn't last. What did happen was that people work out differently. People are going to the gym in the middle of the workday to break it up when they're working from home. Third Space, for one, is opening more and more clubs in suburbs rather than in the city centres, because if people aren't necessarily going to the office, they might like to have a gym that's close to home instead. So the pandemic definitely didn't kill gyms. It did change the industry, though.
So it's not just the luxury end of things like Third Space that is doing all right. It's sort of across the board.
It's something that the analysts call a barbell effect. So there is a consumer slowdown going on, and very rich people aren't really affected by this. So they keep pumping money into the premium gyms. At the same time, budget gyms are doing very well. They make up a growing share of the gym industry because regular middle-class people no longer want to pay for that sort of mid-market gym. So now those gyms that charge maybe $20 a month, they don't have any frills, they're also doing really well. And the thing to remember is that people are going to the gym for different reasons now. There's this really interesting survey that's by MindBody, which is a company that makes software for gyms and salons and things. And they found that in 2021, most people went to the gym to control their weight. But in 2023, people said they were going to the gym to live a long and healthy life. So if the reason you're going is different, what you're looking for there is different, which explains why those premium offerings just keep doing very well.
So from what you've seen, is this kind of what the world of gyms will now look like? The no-frills version and the super high-end version and not much in the middle?
Yeah, so I mean, when the consumer crunch ends, I think some of this might also end. But what the gym industry looks like, what people get when they walk into a gym will just keep changing. So, for example, after COVID and the consumer downturn, the next big challenge for the industry is slimming drugs. In the US in particular, more and more people are taking slimming drugs. And in the gyms that I visited, people said, well, it's not like people on slimming drugs don't come to the gym. It's just that when they lose fat, they're also losing muscle. So they're looking for strength exercises rather than cardio. They also said to me that young people, millennials and Gen Z, they talk a lot about loneliness. So they are coming to the gym to meet people. So you'll see more and more gyms offering socials and happy hours and just any reason for people to hang out at the gym after a class ends.
Avantika, thanks very much for your time.
Thanks for having me, Jason.
The Grandmaster sits at the pinnacle of chess. It's a rating given to someone who symbolizes someone who sort of mastered the game and all of its many intricacies.
Vishnu Padmanabhan is our Asia correspondent.
It was first used in 1838 by a publication to describe the exploits of a British player called William Lewis, who was 51 years old at that time. But nowadays, the top talents are much, much younger. Every few months, you get news articles saying there's been a grandmaster that's 13 years old, 12 years old, 8-year-old beats a grandmaster and so on. So this idea of a sporting prodigy is getting, I'd feel, in other sports less frequent. But in chess, it seems to be getting more common.
So why are we seeing so many young grandmasters?
So I think there are two reasons. One is that there are a lot more people playing chess because it's become much easier to play chess thanks to technology. You can play chess now on apps, online. And I think the pandemic accelerated that trend as more people got into chess during lockdowns when there was nothing else to do. And chess has become more popular in culture. The Queen's Gambit, a Netflix series about chess, was quite popular. That might have helped. The second reason is that young people are particularly suited to chess because a lot of chess relies on memory or learning and memorizing moves and opening sequences and closing sequences. And younger brains are sort of more capable of doing that. That's why they say it's easier to pick up a language when you're younger. And it's the same reason you're able to learn chess when you're younger.
Do pushy parents play a role, do you think?
They might do. I'm sure they do, as they do in every sport. And it's an easier sport, I think, to be a pushy parent than others because it involves little cost. There's no driving to a training camp or taking your kids for practice. It's just practice is all done in the room, on the internet, and you can control it more. So perhaps that could be an explanation as well.
So how do you train to be a grandmaster?
So there's two ways to learn chess in the sense. One, obviously, is you play it. And now it's very easy for anyone to play chess against someone who's really good be it in real life or it could be a computer. So you can play a computer that can set, and you can set the level. I want to play a computer rated X, and that gives you a lot of scope for development. And the other big part is I think it's easier to learn more about chess today, because back in the day you'd have to read books to learn, okay, these are some of the famous openings, or these are the patterns of play that you need to succeed in chess. Now you can just do that through apps and technologies. There are websites that allow you to learn these things very quickly.
Are the younger grandmasters actually edging the older ones out of the market?
No, I don't think that's the case. If you look at the Chess Olympiad, you do see a lot of the older grandmasters still playing. It's just the case, I think a lot of it just, what's happened is a lot more people are playing chess. So obviously, because when a lot more people are playing, there'll be a lot more grandmasters. And a grandmaster basically means that you've exceeded a certain rating. And now there are more people that exceeded a certain rating. But it does not necessarily mean that you'll be guaranteed to win trophies or, have a wonderful career. So that will depend on your performance at these tournaments against other grandmasters and so on. So there is, while there's a lot of young talent, it's not necessarily that all of them will flourish. But that excitement that comes with the hope of seeing these prodigies and one of them can make it, and then you trace their journey through their careers, that is exciting for any sports fan. And I think that's why chess fans should be excited about this golden era.
Vishnu, thank you. Great to talk to you.
Thanks for having me.
On tomorrow's Weekend Intelligence, we'll be telling the story of Michael Kovrig, a former Canadian diplomat who spent more than 1,000 days imprisoned in China. He was subject to persistent interrogation and was kept in a padded cell with the lights always on, in a system, he says, designed to crush the human spirit. The first of his extraordinary 2-part interview will be free to listen. Until then, that's it for this episode of The Intelligence. The show's editors are Chris Impey and Jack Gill. Our deputy editor is John Joe Devlin, and our sound designer is Will Rowe, with help this week from Timo Saylor. Our senior producers are Rory Galloway and Sarah Larniuk. Our senior creative producer is William Warren. Our producers are Maggie Kadifa and Benji Guy, and our assistant producer is Henrietta McFarlane, with extra production help this week from Peter Granitz, Jonathan Day, and Emily Elias. We'll see you back here tomorrow.